Hi guys, Twitch here from Creep Designs, and today we're bringing you something extra special with a Halloween challenge. This challenge is hosted by Kara at Lemons to Lemonade. You can find her on YouTube as well, of course. So if you haven't already, go and subscribe to her channel, as she is our wonderful host for this challenge. Alright, so this is the piece we're working on. By we, I mean I, because I work alone. Yeah, I've had to zoom out to show this one because it's quite big. Like, it's almost as tall as me. It's got a pretty cool old handle on it, so I'm definitely keeping that. It's got a bar there to hang things from. Got an old sticker here. Yeah, this side doesn't have a handle on it. Let's see if you can see this. It's got a little latch. And then a loop there for the latch to go into. Yeah, these are laminate. Horrible plasticky laminate. But they are firmly in place. Obviously someone's added these at some point because this would have been hanging space. I will obviously paint all of that. What's up? We've got hooks up there. I'll take the hooks out because we don't need those. But I am thinking of turning this into a drinks cabinet or a liquor cabinet kind of thing. I don't know. So let's get on with it. Alright, so the first thing I'm tackling on this piece is to fill this random hole. I'm doing this by getting some skewers, rolling them around in some PVA glue, kind of just shoving them in there and packing the hole with more skewers and glue until I can't fit any more in there. Once that's all dry, I then cut both, like completely dry, I cut both sides off with my multi-tool, and then I'll just putty it to fill any gaps that are there, let that dry, sand it smooth, and then it's good to go. So I've decided to stain the inside using Satin Millie washed away hound now, and I'm using a 12mm round sleek brush to do it so that it's easier to get right into the corners and all the small spaces. Moving on to the shelves that have been previously fitted by someone else. These shelves are covered with like a melamine or a laminate type crap, and the edges are filled in with silicone. So rather than trying to remove the silicone, I've placed my taped edge a little higher, a little above the silicone, and I'm going over the entire shelf and the silicone with Satin Millie primer and adhesive bond to help the paint stick to everything. So I am going to be painting these shelves with Satin Millie Black Bear, and I don't usually use a primer under dark colours, but in this case I'm using the primer for its adhesive bond properties, like I said, to help the paint stick. But most other times I wouldn't bother using a primer under a dark colour. So now I'm going in with Satin Millie Black Bear Boutique Furniture Paint. This is straight over the top of the primer and adhesive bond. I've seen others have trouble with black paint over white, and that they don't get very good coverage with whatever brand of paint they're using. So I just wanted to make sure that you could see just how good the coverage of the black over white is in this case. I only did 2 coats of this, and the coverage was just absolutely amazing. Just like always, I use sleek tape for all of my taping off and stripes and everything because it never fails me. Alright, so to combat the silicone that was growing up the walls, what I've done is I've just gone around the edges with some black paint, and up in the corners, again, I'm going for that kind of gnarly, old, gross look. Kind of blended the paint up as much as I could without going too far, and then I've gone in with some cuts of Millie black wax, left it overnight. I've gone all around the edges with the wax, so up along these edges and kind of run it along these edges and dragged it down a bit through the center. So you can see here I've gone around that electrical cord cutout, and again in the corners. And then this morning, because the black wax has had time to set in, I've then gone in with just some clear cuts of Millie wax with my wax brush. Right, so I'm going to start working on the outside of the cupboard now, and I know I want to add a little bit of fancy stuff to the outside, so I'm using 2 of these. These are from Would You Bend, and I'm basically going to be applying these to the front of this section here. I've measured obviously where the center is, and then I've drawn some pencil lines towards the outside of where these will sit, and as you can see here, I've also marked where the center is on here and put markings on the outside. This is a technique you can use for a lot of different things, including like posters and stuff like that, to make sure you get them centered. Just mark where the center lines are on the outside, and then all you got to do is line up the lines with the lines on here. So line them up at these points. To apply it, I'm using Sally's wood glue and just brushing it out, making sure the entire piece is covered evenly. Line it up with the center. I hit it with a little bit of heat to try and start the drying process of the glue, which makes it easier to get it to stay in place. Once I've got it centered and staying in place, I use a brush to brush out the glue that's coming out around the edges. It's really easy stuff to work with. Anyone can do it, and it's absolutely nothing to be intimidated by. Right, so I'm now going in with, I'm going to start off with Dixie Belle chalk paint in the colour Evergreen, and I'm using a 50mm sleek brush. So I've just decided to grab my 15mm round sleek brush to help me get into corners. To apply the second coat of evergreen, I used my misting bottle to help make the application a bit easier, as it had got quite warm this day. It just helps some paint move around a lot easier and can also help eliminate brush strokes. So I decided to add a different shade of green in, and I'm using just a cheap, can't think what it's called, a cheap brush, chippy brush, I got it. I'm using Millie Carter's Green, I think it was Carter's Green, oh my god. Now I've just put a little bit on a palette, just a cheap plastic palette, and I've got some paper towel on there as well to dab the excess off, because I only want a little bit of this on here. It's just to add a bit of like what might be water damage, I guess, just to help with that aged effect. So I'm just kind of like dry brushing it and like dabbing it into all the crevices and nooks and everything, and kind of dragging it down. It won't show through this much once I'm completely done with this piece and once we get further into it, but little peaks of it will still show through. So now I'm using Millie primer and adhesive bond on the sides, and I'm using a 50mm sleek brush. I've started lining my paint containers with foil, because as much as I know that's a bit wasteful, the amount of water that I'm using to wash my containers and the amount of extra effort and time it takes, this is saving me a lot of time doing this. And if I plan on coming back with the primer later on, I literally just put it aside and it'll dry out, and I'll just pour more on straight on top and keep going. I ended up doing 2 coats of the Millie primer and adhesive bond. Hands up in the comments section who can tell me what you think I'm going to be doing for the sides. I'm going to show you why you want to get good quality tape for doing this kind of stuff. I will be doing a separate video showing how I do stripes, but if I did it in this video it would have ended up way too long. So now that I've got the tape on, I'm going over the tape with Daisy's milk again. I promise I will explain this to anyone who doesn't understand in the separate video. Once I've got the Daisy's milk on and it's dry, I then going in with Millie Black Bear. Alright, so this is why you use good quality tape. It is blowing a gale out there. Yeah, this is why you use good quality tape. So it doesn't look too bad from a distance. The tape has taken paint off all over the place, which the sleek tape doesn't do. I don't have to worry about peeling the sleek tape off too fast because it doesn't seem to take paint off. As you can see, paint has come off. There is also a ton of bleeding. This is an absolute botch job. So I'm probably going to have to redo this. So I wanted to blend the green in with the black on the sides of the stripes. So I just add a bit more of the evergreen in along the edge. And then I do the same with the black bear and just add another line of that in. I grab my sleek brush and I start to blend it in. My brush is a little too dry and it is quite warm, so I go and grab my misting bottle. Rather than spraying it on the piece and getting water all over my nice clean stripes, I'm spraying it onto the end of my brush instead. To continue on with the dirty, grimy, dark look that I'm going for, I'm doing some blending with Millie Black Bear. So starting off by laying down some of the black and then laying some evergreen down next to it without touching, because I don't want to contaminate the brushes. Then go in with a clean brush and blend the two together, just like with the Carter's Green that I did before. Not too concerned about going over the edges because it makes it a bit more authentic. I don't want this to be neat and tidy. On this first go over it, I wanted the edges to be a bit softer where I was blending them, but when I come back in later to do more layers of the black, I use less of the evergreen, and to a point where I'm just using the black bear to do some blending and dragging, and just to make it look like old and runny and drippy and like it's got water damage, if that makes sense. But I did a lot of this. I went over it about 3 times until I had enough layers up that I wanted. And if you put too much of the black on there, you can always go back in with more of the evergreen to take that black back a bit. Again, if that makes sense. I will be black waxing this entire piece and waxing over the top of that, obviously, but I wanted the black and white stripes to remain crisp and clean and didn't want to risk getting any black wax or anything onto it and making it dirty. So I've gone over the stripes with 2 coats of Millie Satin top coat, and I think I'm using a 50mm sleek brush. So I decided to have a go at doing a paper transfer, and I'm doing it on these plaques. To get the sizing of the piece right, I just printed out a few different sizes until I got the size I wanted. To do the paper transfer, I'm just using regular old baking paper, the cheap stuff, then tearing it off the size I need, getting a sheet of the paper from the printer, and using just regular old sticky tape to tape it down. Don't worry about taping the sides, just tape the end that goes into the printer and the end that comes out. This is just a regular old cheapo printer. I didn't need anything fancy to do this, which I was really happy about. Now I couldn't actually go through the process of showing you it being printed because I needed my phone to print the pieces from, but you get the idea, and I will try and do a separate video showing the process a bit better. So once I printed it in the size I wanted, I just cut it out so it was easier to line it up, flipped it over, and just used one of my transfer scrapers to just rub it on there like any other transfer you'd use. The only downside is the paper doesn't stick to the surface, but it was still really easy to do, didn't actually require that much work at all. I did, however, decide that the surface was too dark for it to stand out very well, so I've gone back in with some Daisy's Milk and Carter's Green to kind of highlight that oval area with some blending and some dabbing and some more blending and some more dabbing, and just kept going until I got it the way I wanted it. Look at that. Look at it. How cool do they look? So now I'm using Millie black wax and my big waxing brush. I think it might be a Gava brush, I'm not sure. And I'm literally just using it everywhere except for the spaces where I don't want a lot of blackness, like in the center of the big panels at the bottom, but getting in everywhere, literally just like stabbing it in there wherever I can get it. I didn't want black wax on the parts, on the plaques where I put the transfer, so I just went over that first with some clear wax to help protect it. So I'm going to be using Millie clear wax, or Hemp Salve. Where are we? There we go. Boutique Hemp Salve. Got there in the end. I'm going to use the same brush that I used to do my black wax, but I have washed it really well using Alice's Wonders brush soap. Look how clean that is. Super soft. Just giving it a quick dry on an old rag. You wouldn't even know that I'd used it for black wax. Alright, so when I'm doing clear wax after a coloured wax, first thing I do is go over the places where I don't want there to be black wax. So I do the clean spaces first, and then that way I'm not dragging the black wax all into the areas where I don't want it. You want it all over, get it everywhere, all swirly and everything. It looks like a mess now, but once this has had time to set in or soak in, I'll then go in with a clean rag and buff it all. So I'm using a old but clean microfiber cloth to do this. These are just one of the cheap dishcloths from Kmart. And whilst I'm buffing it, I'm just moving it around in my hand so that the one spot on the cloth that I'm using doesn't warm up, and the wax will kind of build up on the cloth as you're using it. I'm using Millie Boutique Furniture Hemp Oil and the same rag that I used to buff the outside of the piece to seal the inside. It is technically sealed, but it was a little bit dry in spots, so I'm using the hemp oil to kind of freshen it up and make it a bit richer. And also using the hemp oil to seal the shelves that I painted. I always do this, but I almost forgot to do the drawers, so I'm just giving them a quick scuff sand around the sides before going in with the same stain that I used on the inside, which is Millie Washed Away How Now. So these drawers have a dovetail join on the ends, or on the fronts, so I'm using sleek tape and a knife to cover the dovetail so that I don't paint over it. Generally when I'm doing this, I can feel roughly where the dovetails sit, and I just go with the groove or lift the tape up to see where I need to cut. Hadn't even thought about the key being silver, so took the key and a can of White Knight Rust Guard epoxy something or other from Bunnings that I have left over from something else, sprayed it, tried to move the key so I could keep spraying it, tried to flip it over, ended up throwing it all over the place as you can see, sprayed it again, and realised that I could then use a screwdriver to pick it up, spray it, and then prop the screwdriver up inside some rolls of tape. It's just me. How about we go have a look?